Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Nick Cidado of Boston College joining us. He is a really fun person to talk with. He's publishing a book. I thought it'd be really cool to have him come on because one, I wanted him to be able to talk about his book and what it's about. But then two, I know a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, um, are interested in doing things like that. So we kind of talk about the process a little bit, and then just his career overall and lessons he's learned. So I hope everybody enjoys. And as always, thank you for listening. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Nick Cidado, assistant strength and conditioning coach at Boston College. Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Connor, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Nick reached out, and I thought he'd be a fantastic guest. There's something that we're going to get into in a little bit here, a big project that he's been working on that I think everybody would be really interested in hearing about. But then just, I always kind of scope out guests a little bit. I like to do a little bit of like small recon, and just from your Instagram, your website, everything I can see, you really connect well with your teams. And I'm really just excited to kind of dive into life at Boston College and the life of Nick Cidado. So if you could please just kind of give me your background and then what kind of led you to your current position.
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, I'm an assistant strength coach here at Boston College. I've been here for about 5 years now. Um, and I think what started with me in the field was, just like anybody else, and I'm sure you can relate, is you start off as an athlete, right? And eventually that day comes where you can't keep playing anymore. So I always knew that I want to stay in sports, whether I was going to be a sport coach or what have you. But early on in my own athletic career, I figured out that I love the preparation process. And I found out pretty quickly so I played baseball, basketball, football growing up. And about high school, I found out that I love the training process just as much as I love playing the sport. So I love those off-season grinds of waking up early in the morning, training with your teammates, putting in all those extra sprints, the extra workouts and stuff like that, because I saw what it did for me on the flip side. Once you get in season, I saw the improvement to my performance on the field. So right in high school, I figured out where, I want to be in strength and conditioning. I want to be in exercise science. I want to study the body and learn movement and how to train athletes the right way. I had some good mentors growing up, going through college too, that kind of helped me and guided me in the field. And, I didn't always have, in high school at least, I didn't have the best strength coach. It was just a football coach prescribing sets and reps. And, that's fine. I'd like to see more strength coaches get into the high school level as this field progresses. But it definitely was a segue for me into the field, and knew that I wanted to study exercise science. So once I got to college, it was the same principle. And, I reached out, I got some internships in the private setting, a couple different private settings. And, as I kind of saw what they did and saw their influence on the athletes they coached, I was like, man, you guys really get paid to do this? Like this is your full-time job. You wake up and you just coach and you're around athletes all day, every day. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So as I was finishing college, my undergrad at Bridgewater State, I was finishing up my football career. Just like anything else, it kind of hits you about money wise. What are you going to do for money? I got all this college debt. Is being a strength coach and getting all these internships, am I going to be able to sustain this for the next few years? And so I actually thought about going down the PT route for a little bit. I was like, well, PT makes a little bit more money. Maybe I'll go down that route. But I luckily, I got a mentor who at one of my internships, and he took me on. He hired me right out of college, and it was short money, but I really got my feet wet in coaching and started programming, being on the floor all day, every day. And I figured out right away that, PT probably wasn't for me. That's definitely noble work. And I understood that I'm probably not going to get to work with athletes that much. And, it would take me a while to get to that rank if I did go that route. I'd have to go to more school anyway. So I worked for him. I got all my certifications that summer right after undergrad. And towards the end of that summer, this mentor, his name's Mike Portimani. He was actually the head of football strength and conditioning at BC for some time. He was like, hey, I see a lot of potential in you. I can see that you love the team environment, the team camaraderie. You got to go up. You got to do an internship in the collegiate settings. Just see how you like it. If you don't like it, come back. You can work for me. But you got to at least get your feet wet, see how you'll do. And so he knew the director, Russ, who I work for right now, and he called him up and he said, I got this guy. He wants to do an internship. I think it'll be great for you guys. So I go up there. And I started my internship, and from day one, I was like, yeah, sign me up for this. This is exactly what I want to do. This is where I want to be. I want to work with teams, like towards working towards the ultimate goal of winning games, winning championships, work with sport coaches, work with athletic training, nutritionists, have everybody in the same building to just provide the best for our student athletes. And so I did an internship, and right as I was graduating the internship first semester, they were actually hiring for a graduate assistant. Um, BC doesn't offer any exercise science or anything like that, so what we do is we partner up with Merrimack College, where I can do my education there. So I studied exercise sports science for my master's and did all my coaching at Boston College. So it was a win-win for me. It was also a 9-month program, and BC would pay for half of it. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go down this route. So it was perfect setup for me. Um, and then right towards the end of that, I started in January. So I was finishing up my GA ship here at Boston College, but I still had a semester of school left. So talking to some mentors, they're like, hey, you got to go to another college, learn some new stuff. You can't just do all your development here. There's other ways to coach. You'll learn some stuff there. So I reached out to Harvard, got an internship at Harvard University, and worked there for a semester. And they have 42 teams, right? So you get in that Ivy League, you get experience with everything. So I was working with football all the way down to squash, and then soccer, baseball, lacrosse, everything in between. So I got my hands-on experience with every kind of athlete, every personality, every training age possible, which was a huge you know performance booster for me as a coach as I came up the ranks. And right as that semester ended, started looking for a job, and luck would have it. I actually almost took a job up at Clarkson University and a few other schools. And right as I was about to go, I got a call from Russ, the director here at BC. He said, I got a spot open here. We got a vacancy. You're my first call. I want you to come back and work for me. Here's the teams we'll be working with. And it was a no-brainer for me. I want to work with elite athletes, Division I, Power Five school, and of course, all my family. I'm Boston born and raised, so I want to be around my family too. So that was a big kind of boost for me to stay here as well. And so I've been here ever since. So at Boston College, I've been an intern, I've been a graduate assistant, and I've been a full time for the last 5 years.
What I love about that process, though, right, is one is that you found mentors early because it's tough, especially before you start your internship. I mean, for myself and a lot of coaches I speak with, that process is you get your mentors basically as you start interning, and then they kind of, it really takes a year to kind of develop that relationship where they'll be willing to have those conversations with you, like your mentors were saying early on with you. And then on top of that, for you to take their advice and also leave and go to other places and for me, it's like embracing uncomfortability, right? And yes, it's within the same city, but at the same time, it's a brand new spot where you're learning exactly how everything operates, a new director, new athletes, and how to work with them. And that process, I'm sure, made you a better coach.
Yeah, absolutely. If I didn't do that, I don't know where I'd be now from a just a programming standpoint. Even just like the ins and outs of warming up teams, dealing with large rosters versus small rosters, flow of workouts through different weight rooms. You learn all that stuff by being at multiple places. So it was one of the best decisions I ever did. Harvard actually does a great job with their intern curriculum too. I credit Tim Mullen to that. He runs that. He does an incredible job. And then I also have to, during all this process, I also stayed working in the private sector just to make some money on the side, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And working with general pop, clientele, definitely, I tell all our interns this, definitely makes me a better coach
Oh, yeah.
because, coaching them up is a lot harder than it's coaching up these elite athletes. So I would definitely recommend for anybody listening, stay in the private sector too when you're coming up, because working with 50-year-olds who aren't athletes anymore, and their bodies are beat up from just aging process, you learn a lot about yourself as a coach, and your ability to get them better and get them moving properly.
It's so funny you bring that up because I was just talking with a former intern yesterday, and we were talking about the private sector. And I started off as a personal trainer I was at Temple University, so and then I worked at Penn as well. So basically, the Philly version of your startup. But at that campus, they gave like a insurance break to people who would go and get personal training. Like it was a really good deal for them. So they come in, and these people did not want to work out. Like they would basically just be like, let's let's do yoga, and then we'll figure it out from there. And, and so it made me a better coach from understanding, okay, how can I meet people in the middle? Because it's not, if I try to make it my way, I mean, I'm running like 5-3-1. The first book I read at that time was like starting strength. I'm like, we're going to get everybody to squat 315 pounds. And then they gave me an 80-year-old woman who was the nicest human being on the planet. And I was like, all right, we can not even squat right now. So those different experiences, I think, are so valuable. One question I had that you kind of brought up in your intro was talking about that process of learning everything. You did have a football strength coach, like you said, but a lot of that process is learning on your own. What were kind of the first resources that you looked at? And then the second part to that question as well is, I noticed a trend where, and myself included, when people start to learn on their own at that high school level, a lot of times they can kind of almost dip into that overtraining type side, where you talk about the extra sprints, extra workouts. Did you have any experience with that? And did that kind of end up influencing your philosophy at all?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I just remember doing, like I said, the football coach running. He's a great guy, great football coach, but obviously in public school settings, you can't always budget a strength coach. So
Yeah.
I get it. But yeah, looking back to those workouts and the things that we did, we were doing some stupid stuff, man. Um, but the benefit is you're so young at that age. You're in high
Yeah.
school, you're 14, 15 years old. Luckily, you're that young, you can adapt and you're not going to totally burn yourself out if you're fortunate, and hopefully you don't get any injuries doing it. But that's why I'd like to see more of a push to get more people in high school strength and conditioning so they can segue into college better. But yeah, it definitely has influenced what I do. There was no coordination with the volume that we were running, the
Yeah.
intensity, the days per week, the training frequencies, even the splits throughout the week. Like, it made no sense. Um, but I can't hate on it completely because I fell in love with it still,
Mhm.
right? I still understood the process. I understood of obviously it was football. I understood, why discipline mattered and, showing up and being consistent with training no matter what you were doing. All that stuff was still important. So, but I definitely learned from a programming standpoint, like, well, looking back, probably shouldn't have been running those in that heat too. Like, there was
Oh yeah.
no heat, didn't matter, climbing outside like we have restrictions in the collegiate setting, NCAA now. There was none of that, so it was just pretty much a free for all. But yeah, to answer your question, I've definitely learned a lot. And you asked about kind of the resources too, coming up. When I got in college and once I got my feet wet in the private sector and my first internships, I just really relied on the people I was working with, the coaches, and the network too. I'm not big on social media. I try to avoid some of the stuff that you see on there. I think a lot of people are just trying to sell you stuff. So I reach out to people like you and people who are in the field dealing with what I'm dealing with as well. Um, so there's similarities there. We can kind of talk about it and work through some situations because the reality is everything I'm going through at Boston College, people are going through it at different universities too, the same way, dealing with the same type of coaches and athletes and facility restrictions and what have you. So I think you got to put your eggs in that basket where people relate to actually what you're doing as a coach.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was asked a question yesterday too. What's the biggest thing I've learned from doing this podcast? And it's exactly what you just mentioned. Is everybody at the end of the day does deal with similar problems, and how they come up with those solutions is what I learned the most from. Right, because it's so many different backgrounds and so much different influences go into it that help you learn exactly how to kind of deal with those situations. And that same thing can be applied to whatever university you're currently working at. I love the overtraining aspect too. Like, dude, nothing was better, dude. When you walked in and you were like, all right, I'm gonna do, because I got Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and like I'm like looking at the workouts, I'm like, I can do the hard level,
Yeah.
like, and it's like you go from like preacher curls to hammer curls to then eccentric, wide grip seated, and I'm like, yeah, this is super easy for me, like completely ignoring the fact that everybody who's doing this is on PEDs, right? And
Yeah.
like we go in and do it, and I can't lift my arms above my head. My mom's like, freaking out, but those were exactly like you said. That was what developed the love of training. And when you can bring a friend in too, and you can teach other people how to do those things, like that to me was what kind of developed my coaching a little bit. Was like guys would say, hey, like I know you're lifting all the time. Can you kind of take me in, and then we can kind of go through that. And, I'm giving them like horrible pointers, like I'm like, yeah, curls. It's okay to lift your biceps a little bit,
Yeah.
like, but like it just still kind of develops that love, and that's you kind of just took me back there a little bit, and I always love that aspect. So at Boston College now, what are the teams that you work with?
Yeah, so we've had some turnover with staff and stuff, so we've had some changes and stuff, but primarily women's lacrosse, field hockey. in men's and women's golf right now. I've had, baseball, I've had men's and women's soccer at different points. Um, and then obviously I assist with, we have 32 teams here. So we have 6 on staff. So I assist with every other team too. So
Yeah.
that's kind of all hands on deck for the amount of teams that we have.
One thing that's so interesting to me about lacrosse is how general of a sport it is and how many qualities you have to train. Not only is it going to be speed and agility, it is going to require a general amount of strength, like we previously talked about. It is going to require a lot of these different qualities that you have to be good at a lot of them of these physical qualities. So how do you approach training a sport like lacrosse? What is your process that goes into kind of training them?
Yeah, so work with a field sport like them, you really narrow it down to 3 areas. Your strength, your speed, agility, how fast they are on the field, and then their conditioning capacity. So all 3 of those areas are very important. For me, obviously, strength comes first. What we do in the weight room, you got to build that resiliency in the tissue and around the joints to withstand some of those potential injuries that could pop up. And once you develop that strength, then you can really start to get into the things that resonate with the coaches and the athletes a little bit more, the things that they see directly, which to me is out on the field. I think for a non-physical sport like women's lacrosse or field hockey, you don't need loads of muscle mass, so you don't need to get them to a certain strength or push the numbers in certain movements and stuff like that. I believe there's a ceiling there, and I don't know what that ceiling is, but I think that more of the impact I can make is out on the field and getting them faster, more explosive, working at the different movements as far as crossover running, backpedaling, shuffling, sprinting, accelerating, top end speed, all that stuff that they see and they feel as they actually play the sport, not so much squatting or deadlifting. Um, and then obviously the conditioning capacity is huge. It's an energy system demanding sport, and you got to train the right principles and properties to make sure that they can withstand that and play a full game. You got to be on the same page with the coach and make sure that you replicate how the coach wants to play the game. And for lacrosse, you got to make sure your midi lines are well conditioned and they can run at the tempo that the coaches want to substitute. And then the attacker and defending side, you got to make sure that the way we play is they stay in the whole game. So those our attackers and defenders need to be able to do that. So I think it just takes communication with the coaches about how you want to play, but also for me, I really have to prioritize areas where I think I can make the most gain. And for me, it's what resonates with the athletes the most in a sport like that. It's out on the field, so I try to make the most impact out there in my sessions.
I love that you bring up the conditioning aspect too, because it reminds me, I'm from upstate New York, and everybody from that area plays for a spell, of lacrosse. And I had a short time playing, and I remember they put me in midi, and I never played really because I was awful. And everybody there had been playing since they were super young. And so it just brings back the memory of me being in midfield and being absolutely gassed and just recognizing, hey, maybe the sport isn't for me.
Yeah, it's a lot of running out there.
Oh, absolutely. And now that kind of, I think there's a perfect segue into what I really wanted to talk about today as well is the project that we mentioned earlier in the podcast, the book that you're writing. I could kind of try to give a general intro from what I've seen, but I think it'd be better to hear from you. Can we kind of hear kind of a quick breakdown of the book, and then what people could expect to see or expect to read?
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I'm really excited to finally share this with the world and athletes and coaches alike. It'll be published January 30th, so we're in the pre-order period right now, so it's coming soon. But the title is called "Sweat More During Peace, Bleed Less During War," and the subtitle is "Preparation Tactics That Generate Success." Um, so what this book is, it's all about preparation. So I think it's going to resonate a lot with strength coaches and athletes. My background's obviously in athletics, so a lot of the messages and stories in the book are directly applicable to athletics. So I think the most targeted audience will be here, which is why I'm on this podcast and sharing it with the world. That's my target here. But it can be applied to anything else. It can be applied to business, relationships, education, in every normal day-to-day life operation. Because the reality is, we all prepare in some capacity for everything we do in our lives, whether it's getting ready for a job interview, whether it's delivering a speech, doing a speaking engagement, whether it's getting your body right to to get to a workout, um, whether it's getting your food ready so you can feed your family. Everything we do requires a degree of preparation, some more so than others. Um, but I think it's so simple, and I think people often overlook the simplicity of it, and they overlook the process of preparing for whatever that is. So this book is really just designed to, give you some tactics and some principles that will help that preparation process. So sweat more during peace, bleed less during war. Obviously, that's a quote. The origin relates back to an old Chinese proverb, and it's been coined by U.S. generals, and it's become more popular. But essentially, what it means is, working beforehand. So sweat more during peace, putting more work in beforehand, so that when that time of conflict comes or when you're called upon, you're essentially ready to go. Right. So you can kind of change the words around a little bit. So sweat, what does that mean? Sweat means, work, the work you put in before. Peace is that controlled environment. So working harder in that controlled environment. So when you get to bleeding, so bleed is like the errors that will pop up. There's less of those when the war comes. So during the competition or during whatever adversity you're up against. So that's kind of the message behind the quote, and it's something that has been on my whiteboard up in my office since I got here. My athletes know me by it. It's on all my summer training packets and my winter training packets, and any car that they pick up. Sweat more during peace, bleed less during war. And so I felt it was fitting for this book. I didn't really ever set out to be an author. I never had that vision, but I just, as corny as it sounds, it kind of flew right out of me when I went to write it, and I'm happy that I finally get to share it with the world.
Well, I think my favorite piece of that, right, is a concept that I think a lot of strength coaches really try to get across to their athletes, which is delayed gratification. And it's so, I get caught myself in this trap of thinking like, hey, like, how can they not see this in this specific scenario, right? If we were to go, sweat more in peace, all right, we would bleed less during war. Uh, and for me, it seems so obvious, but then I think back, okay, when I was 18 through, 21, 22, would that concept have been so obvious to me? And I think the best teams that I've worked with are the ones who can really grasp that concept, and can embrace it, like you're saying, with your teams have done as well. Um, have you kind of applied this since the beginning of your career, or is it something that kind of came up as you got more experience working with athletes?
Yeah, I think it's something I've always believed in, right? Like the reason why I got in the field is I saw what the work does in the off season, right? So that's sweating more during peace in that controlled environment, right? That weight room, the practice, stuff that's controlled. So if you work hard in those areas, and I saw what it did for me as an athlete, when I got to the games, I felt strong, I felt fast, I felt ready to go. And that's why I think it's going to resonate with strength coaches across the country in the private setting and the collegiate setting, because that's what we do. We prepare these athletes, all off season in the weight room. We put them through grueling conditioning sessions, stuff that they don't want to do. They don't want to wake up early in the morning, and I'm running them in the stadium at 6 o'clock in the morning. And up here in Boston, it's whatever 32 degrees out. It's freezing cold. They don't want to be out there. I don't want to be out there. Whatever. But you get it done because it's that general, mindset of this is going to pay off down the road. And I'm fortunate enough to work with a very good lacrosse program. We won the national championship in 2021, and I talk about a little bit about that process in the book. But they're an example of a team that really bought into that concept. And anytime we're out there and it was freezing cold in the off season, and I put them through these heavy metabolic workouts in the weight room when they're just dripping sweat, and workouts that all you guys have experienced. I'm no different in that sense, but they really bought into the fact that when we get to May, we're playing for late May right now. We're playing for that Memorial Day weekend. We're going to win a national championship, and we ended up doing it. So, and that's kind of where this book started, because I kind of want to talk about that story, and because I think a lot of strength coaches, and even if you don't win that ultimate goal, because we've certainly lost the big game too. We've lost the national championship the last 2 years, but it's still about that process of doing everything you can beforehand so you're ready. And it's symbolic of other areas of life too. When you go into a job interview, you want to do all your due diligence before, so you're prepared. You're ready to answer every single question in the interview. And you create what's called the expected result. And I talk about that in the book a little bit. And all that means is that's the answer you're going to get based off the work that you put in before. And it's that simple. And that's why preparation is so important for everybody.
That leads me to my favorite question, which is, why are you surprised? whether it's successful or more of a failure in an instance with an athlete, I kind of always ask them like, "Hey, why are you surprised right now?" Because again, like we talked about, it's kind of that simple equation: you get in, you put in, and then you maybe receive what you put into it, right? And so I love that because again, it's the expected result, and you kind of know what the result is going to be based off of your preparation. Can you kind of talk me through your process of first thinking of writing a book, and then actually putting words to a page? How did that process come to you? You said it was easy, it kind of just flowed right out of you. What was that like?
Yeah, so like I said, I've never aspired to be an author. If you asked me even 3 years ago if I was ever going to write a book, I would say definitely not. Um, so I started writing it about Thanksgiving time last year, so it's really only been about a year. And as corny as it sounds, like it just flew right out of me. I knew what I believed in. I had the title, "Sweat More During Peace, Bleed Less During War." It's just what I believed in. I'm a huge believer in preparation, so it made sense for me to write this book. I think that's where you want to start. And once I had that, I just put pen to paper. I structured the book of my principles. So it's three principles that I attack, and then within each principle are certain tactics, and then within each tactic is certain stories that kind of help build up why you should be doing that, and relate it to different areas of life. But it only took me about 8 weeks to write, so about 2 months to actually sit down and write. And then you go from there. I never knew anybody that's written a book before. I don't know any authors personally. So from there, I just had to figure out a lot on my own. So I reached out to an editor, right after I wrote it. And I pretty much said, "Is this any good? Is this worth pursuing? Or should I just scrap this up and just keep it in the archives for myself and I'll read it myself in 30 years?" But I got some good feedback. I got some good feedback on the title itself. I think that's what's going to help sell it. And then from there, it's you got to go through the process of finding an agent, going through the editing process, internal design, external design, and that's really what takes so long. So it's been about a year. By the time it's published, it'll be about, let's see, 15 months, so a little bit over a year from when I first put pen to paper till it's published, which is actually pretty quick for the writing process. So, um, like I said, it's a very genuine book. It comes from a lot of my own experiences, which is why I think it was so easy for me to write. And it's very relatable. I don't try to, lie about anything. It's things I've been through, things that other people have been through, and then I did my due diligence on professional athletes and professionals in business world and see what they've done for preparation, just to make sure that it's very genuine and people can take it for what it's worth.
That's kind of why I ask about the process as well too, because within strength and conditioning, a large part of it is self promotion as well, right? I mean, I think the coaches, sometimes with the loudest voices are the ones who get the attention, right? And so, in that from that standpoint, I think a lot of people do want to get into that writing process. They do want to maybe publish an article, but for you to take on a book, that's a massive venture, and like you said, you didn't know any authors. You had to go through that process all by yourself. Uh, were there any challenges that you faced? Was there anything that was really difficult for you to navigate while you were trying to get this book published?
Yeah, so definitely just the marketing of it. I'm not big on social media. I never have been. So this has definitely got me out of my comfort zone, because I have to post about it. I have to talk about it in order for it to sell. And I don't even care about the sales at all. I wrote this book to reach an audience and hopefully help people. So that's definitely got me out of my comfort zone a little bit, just being on social media so much. And um, I will say that going through the process of editing and working with a publisher is very different than anything I've ever done in my life. Just going back and forth with a professional. And in reality, I'm the professional because I'm the author, and just understanding that, they're doing what I'm saying, and then they're giving feedback, but it's really based off what I'm doing is just kind of a weird concept because I've never, looked at myself as an author before. So that was definitely different.
I mean, that's got to be almost similar to the process of when you first become a strength coach of, kind of recognizing like, hey, I am the professional. I am the one who's kind of leading this, but it's in a brand new instance. And so you've gone through that process all over again with writing the book. Did you go through a process where you interviewed people, or was it mostly a study, and kind of look at more of those other areas like you talked about within business, within professional sports? Was it more of kind of just finding like anecdotal evidence from there?
Yeah, just looking at really just evidence and stuff like that. I did do a few interviews just to gain some some factual evidence in certain areas. I don't want to persuade people and make up lies. I think with social media now, people can have a platform to say anything they want. And I think that's bad. I think there's a lot of false evidence out there, but that's just my opinion. And so I want to make it as factual as possible in certain areas, but then you also got to understand a lot of these experiences in the book are my own, and I'm vulnerable in some positions too. So there's some authenticity there as well. So um, yeah, I just try to really create a genuine book that everybody can relate to.
And that's awesome. I can't wait to read it. And when will that come out?
So it will be published January 30th. It'll be available everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, IndieBound. 30,000 different vendors, and then right now we're still in the pre-sale process, so you can still order it right now. You just won't get it until that publication date in January.
Man, we're in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah,
That's big time right there.
yeah, and that's the other thing too about the process is there's different deals, and I didn't know this getting into it. There's so many different deals you can take with your book, and the big thing for me is I didn't want to change anything. I got offers from traditional agents that wanted to change a lot of the book, and I just didn't want to do that. So I was I took cuts on money or whatever just because I want to give a good product that I actually believe in, and I don't want it altered or changed by anybody else, because at the end of the day they didn't write it and they haven't been through the experiences that I have. So I just want it to be very genuine in that sense.
No, it makes complete sense, and exactly the word you just said. That's how it's genuine, right? And I feel like that's where I think that's like you can parallel it with strength and conditioning. It's the same process where somebody might see new lift on social media, and younger coaches or may implement that immediately because it looks cool, right? But it's not genuinely their program, and so it kind of takes away from that authenticity, and then I think kind of breaks down the not necessarily the integrity, but the quality of the actual program, and that would have, I think modified the quality of the book itself. And I think, I mean, I commend you because I would be nervous as hell to publish a book, and that's just quite a process. So for you to one go about publishing a book, but then for two, for you to stick to your guns and say, no, I want to stay genuine and put out what I want to put out in the world, I think is really admirable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wait. I think a lot of people wait, and they don't follow through with things that they want to do. I had this idea for the book. There's no better time to do it than right now. You never know what's going to happen in the future. So I just felt like right now would be the perfect moment to do it. And like I said, you got to be vulnerable. I took a risk. When you're reaching out for endorsement quotes and people to support your book, you have to give it to them and they have to read it. And when I was doing that process, I'm like, there's a good chance this person hates the book, or this person is like, what the heck is this about? So this process has definitely got me out of my comfort zone. I've had to be vulnerable, and just like anything else, you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. And if you really want to make an impact on people, I've said it a billion times that you got to be genuine, and then you just got to be willing to put in the work and follow through what you say you're going to do.
Did you, in that process where you sent it out for, sorry, what was the word you used? For people, for
Endorsement
quotes?
quotes.
Endorsement
Yeah.
quotes. Okay, excellent. Yeah. When you sent out for endorsement quotes, did you initially send it to mentors?
Yeah, so initially I sent it to editors. Well, actually, I had my fiance read it right away.
Yeah.
She was the first person. She just had to tell me like, thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, what should I do with this thing? And then from there, yeah, mentors and close people around me. And honestly, actually, even before them, probably just editors. I sent to editors right away. Fortunately, I knew one, so I didn't have to. Kind of a friend I'd have to pay to do it. I just sent them a few chapters and said, "Is this worth anything?" And then just like anything else, you gain confidence as you get some feedback. Then I go back in, I make some changes to some of their feedback, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. And then when you are getting the endorsement quotes, it's closer to the final product, so it's like, all right, it's too late to turn back now. Like, this thing is going regardless. So that's when it's kind of worrisome, because it's like, this is being published anyway. So I hope you like it.
We're locked in.
Yeah.
This is happening. I mean, I'm sure you're taking a well deserved break. Do you have an idea for a second book? Are you looking to publish a second one?
Yes, I do.
There you go.
I actually, while I was writing this first one, other ideas started popping in my head. And yeah, I already got the title for it. I haven't put pen to paper yet because my focus right now is really just, promoting this book and getting it out there. And I got to do some speaking engagements and obviously my full-time jobs that I work. And I just kind of want to enjoy this process. I think you can't rush the journey. You got to enjoy this stuff while you're doing it. But there will certainly be a next book. That's a promise.
That's awesome. I love to hear it. And are you right now with lacrosse? Are you in your preseason time frame?
Yeah, so they just went home for break. They're in their 5 week, winter break. They'll come back. Um, what's their date? They come back January 16th, and then we essentially have 3 weeks of preseason together before their first game. So that's a really important 3 weeks. And right now, just tapering down from the off season, I send them home with their winter packet, and a lot of it's on them, as you know. They got to put in the work and they got to prepare. As I talk about in the book, on their own. They got to do the hard part because no one's going to make them do this. And they got to come back on that report date, ready to go for a good 3 weeks, right into the season.
I mean, feel like this book is coming out at the perfect time because you can, pull it out and say, quite literally, I wrote the book on this.
Yeah, and the athletes are great. They're excited to read it, and they've been so supportive of me, and just like obviously I support them, and I'm just fortunate to be in a really good situation here at Boston College.
That's awesome, and that's what I love about athletes as a whole is how supportive they are of your own kind of ventures. Like I remember, this is going to sound so lame in comparison to writing a book, but I remember posting TikToks and everything for the first time, and the athletes would clown me a little bit, but then we kind of as I gained a following, it kind of turned into more of them asking, like how might I get into this process, and but just being very supportive overall. There's another certification I'm looking to get this summer, and I have the textbook right next to me right now, and I've been reading at it. And like athletes will come up and ask me, like, a couple of weeks later, like after they first see me reading the book, like, hey, how's studying going? Like, are you doing good? And that part of college athletics is to me what is so much fun. Did your athletes know about the process of writing the book?
No, I kept it pretty hush hush, to be honest with you, because like I said, I didn't know where it was going to go. So I didn't really tell too many people about it. And then it slowly started to come out. And now they all know about it. They all pre ordered and they're all excited to read it. And, some of the teams I told them, I said, I talked about our national championship year in 2021, and some of those players are still on the team. So, they're so excited to read about it. And, some of those, some of those players on the team I actually sent it to early. As kind of like a thank you, I get to work with you, and it was a privilege to work with you. I kind of sent it to them. So some of them have actually read it already, and yeah, I'm just excited for everybody to read it. I think it will be good. I think it'll be great for strength coaches, athletes. That's kind of the main market there. But I do have to say one thing. I congratulate you for the stuff you do on TikTok, because I tell you what, that's social media, man. I got to take tips from you because I'm so bad at it, and I'm working to get better, but I feel like it's just not for me.
It's tough, man. And sometimes I'll post some videos and I'll look back and I'm like, oh, I don't know about this one. But ultimately at the end of the day, my advice to you would be just post.
Yeah,
If you just regularly post, a lot of times the algorithm ends up kind of putting your stuff out there, and then the more you do it, probably the same process with writing. The more you do it, easier it comes, and it kind of flows smoothly. So,
yeah.
uh,
I respect the heck out of that, because just like writing the book, you got to put yourself out there, and I don't think enough people do that. So I respect that.
thank you, and that's exactly why I was excited to bring you on the podcast as well, because I agree with you 100%. I don't think a lot of coaches end up putting themselves out there. And what I mentioned to earlier of this kind of self promotion deal with strength and conditioning, it's not in a bad way whatsoever, but it is in a way where, strength and conditioning coaches are historically underpaid for the amount of work that they put in. And I think it's only fair for, all these people who have these amazing ideas to actually get recognition for it and to gain some monetary value from it as well, because you put all this time into it, you put all this thought, and it's your passion. And sometimes it's unfortunate because coaches can kind of get just pigeonholed or stuck in this one specific job, and may not be as willing to put themselves out there, and their name isn't as heard. The awards don't really come to the coaches that a lot of people don't know about, which is, those can be kind of superficial things, but at the end of the day, I think it is really important for strength coaches to kind of self promote. So I respect you on that end for doing that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a huge part of the process for strength coaches. And early on in my career, I feel like I was just so locked in on just my sole job here. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're valued at way higher than what we actually do. And like you said, we're not necessarily compensated for it. most of us have master's degrees. We have the credentials, the certifications, the experience, and oftentimes that pay doesn't come with it. And I'm speaking very generally here, but I think it's important for coaches to, work on the side and train people, start their own online business and train people, do some writing stuff, do some social media stuff, because at the end of the day, we're definitely qualified to do all these things. And I think that college athletics and directors and people that we're around should help support this, because we're definitely qualified and we can definitely make a huge impact in other areas.
And that's a massive point as well too. It can be a struggle sometimes if your administration or your coaches don't necessarily support your side ventures. But that's to me that's such a rare case, because I remember our coaches here when they found out I was doing the podcast, it was never once like, oh, are you recording this podcast during work hours? They kind of just asked about it. Asked what I do, and it was nice because I got to kind of tell them like, hey, this is probably the best continuing education piece that I have, because I get to talk with coaches. And then, the worst part about a textbook is you can't really ask it questions. It can't really elaborate on things. So the same process can be said for the podcast. And I think it's been super beneficial to me. And so, I guess my message with this too is any strength coaches, like just like you mentioned earlier, just go out and do it. Whatever you're looking to do, whatever that thought is in your mind, I think you should go out and do it. And who knows, you may end up publishing a book. That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah, exactly. Don't hold back.
No, no, that's awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate your time. I'm really excited to read the book. I'll be on the pre-order list, so I can't wait to get it out. I'm ordering it directly through Barnes and Noble. I don't know why I'm so hung up on that, but that has got me excited. Uh, but thank you for coming on, man. I've had a great time.
Yeah, Connor, I really appreciate you having me, and thanks for the support on the book. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.